HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Vote Collectors, the true story of the scamsters, politicians, and preachers behind the nation's greatest electoral fraud. By Michael Graff and Nick Ochsner. Read by Nick Ochsner. Prologue. Morning in Mother County, December 2018. A blazing pink sky decorates the tops of flat fields along the two-lane road that leads to the town of Tar Heel. It's just before 7 on a Friday morning in December 2018. The thatch remnants of whatever had been growing in late summer still lean towards the Cape Fear River, 2 months after Hurricane Florence's floodwaters receded. Men in jeans and flannel shirts ache and groan as they climb the steps of the Tar Heel Baptist Church for the weekly Friday men's prayer breakfast. Around the low-ceilinged fellowship hall are 35 men of different races and political persuasions, bonding over sunrise, prayers, and bags of Hardee's. "Ham biscuits on the right," a man says, "sausage on the left." They talk quietly. They give firm handshakes and a few hugs. They're black and white and Latino. They've been through hell with the hurricanes lately. Some lost their entire fall crop. Some might soon lose a farm. On top of that misery, they've been made fun of all over the world. Tar Heel, population 150, holds 2 distinctions. Its name matches the nickname and logo of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, 115 miles to the northwest. And it's the home of the Smithfield Packing Plant, the world's largest hog processing operation. But over these few weeks in December 2018, reporters from New York and Washington have rented cars and come here to ask questions about the door-to-door ballot collection program that upended the midterm election. It's big news elsewhere. For whatever reason, small-town shit becomes big news. A congressional race got held up. Dan McCready, the boyish-looking Democrat, got close to turning a very red district blue for the first time in almost 4 decades. He'd lost to Mark Harris, the preacher with the good hair, by less than 1,000 votes. But a month after Election Day, the week after Thanksgiving, a state board of elections said it couldn't certify the race because something was crooked with the ballots of Bladen. They said it had been going on for years and that now, after such a close election, it had to stop. That was about a week before the prayer breakfast in the fellowship hall. In the days between, people in suits used the scandal to point fingers at other people in suits, to justify whatever political beliefs they have. The president hadn't done them any favors, tweeting out lies about Democrats and voter fraud and immigrants who cast ballots illegally. Now, some people on his own side were caught, which would be bad enough even if it didn't mean that all the left-leaning news organizations in the Western Hemisphere were hitching their assumptions to the story and using it as a reason to say, "See, Republicans are the cheaters." Stephen Colbert even devoted 4 minutes of his monologue to the scandal around the door-to-door ballot collections here. "They're like Jehovah's, I hope there aren't witnesses," Colbert said. "The men in the church are tired of it. Y'all didn't give a damn," they kept saying to outsiders, when the chemical company in our north contaminated the drinking water. Didn't give a damn when water rose to the roofs of homes and businesses in the county seat during Hurricane Florence. Didn't give a damn when hog farmers needed help defending themselves against the slick Texas lawyers who filed those multi-million-dollar nuisance lawsuits on charges that hog farms stink. No shit. But now, here they were, these people from all over, giving a damn about Bladen County, North Carolina, chasing down a few scribbles on ballots and saying it's the home of the biggest political story outside the Beltway. Where, they wonder, have y'all been? To understand how election fraud happens, and how a small place like Bladen County became a siren of a fracturing democracy years ahead of the 2020 election and violent attempts to overturn it, you can't make simple assumptions. You have to understand how big city prejudices about race and class can be flipped upside down in places like this. You have to understand that it's a story about nothing and everything. You have to understand the land. Bladen used to be the ocean floor. Millions of years ago, saltwater waves crashed against the Uwharrie Mountains, about 150 miles inland from the current Atlantic coastline. Over time, the sea slipped east and left behind a grainy, sandy soil, ripe for peanuts and soybeans and longleaf pines. It left behind the coastal plain, the region of flatlands where Bladen County sits. The ocean tells the story of the past, but also the future. A series of devastating floods have amounted to the ocean's way of saying it wants to reclaim some of what it left behind. Already, some places have conceded. Way out on North Carolina's eastern elbow, the last 3 residents of the once thriving maritime port, Portsmouth Island, left in the 1970s, mostly in response to a series of hurricanes. The only occupants left in the village now are the mosquitoes and biting flies. The federal government turned Portsmouth into a national park, with some of the softest sand you'll ever encounter, and the park staff keeps up maintenance on a few cottages, an old church, and the post office. They stand there neatly still today, as if their occupants will be right back. The closer you look at the flood maps and predictions, the more you wonder if places like Bladen County are next. What was a county with 35,000 inhabitants in 2010 now has only slightly more than 30,000 in 2020. Eastern North Carolina has a bit of a history with vanishing settlements. The first European child born in North America, Virginia Dare, was delivered on Roanoke Island here in 1587. She was part of what's still known as the Lost Colony, a group of settlers who disappeared but still live on through a glittery outdoor theater production designed by the Broadway legend William Ivy Long. The first European settlers who survived in North America called Bladen the Mother County, and its original boundary stretched from these flatlands near the Atlantic Ocean all the way west to the sandstone tips of the Great Smoky Mountains. Over time, they chopped off sections. It's now shaped like a low-top boot, and at 874 square miles, it's the 4th largest of North Carolina's 100 counties. Its southeastern toe is only 30 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, and its northwestern heel about 70. It's a forgotten stretch of sand and peat. Poor laborers line up each morning inside the Smithfield packing plant to slaughter 35,000 hogs a day. In the past 3 years, 2 of the wettest hurricanes in history have flooded entire towns and put family farms out of business. The poverty rate is 20%, and the median household income of about $32,000 is half the national median. The population decline can be traced to any number of underlying causes, as some depart to find employment, others to leave flooded-out houses, others on the solemn wings of an opioid overdose. These are the table settings for the small-scale fraud that fudges the result of a congressional race. They are the foundation for the distrust that led not just to the 9th Congressional District mess, but to the years-long preoccupation with election fraud that led to the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol in 2021. Perhaps the most worrisome thing about what happens here in 2018 is how unworried most locals were about it. Fraud, to many people in Bladen County, was just a fact of Democratic life. Hoax or be hoaxed. Bladen is not alone, though. It is a most accurate representation of eastern North Carolina and of the rural South. It's a place most people come to know only because they pass through it on their way to the beach or when someone's in trouble. It is a series of rivers pushing into the vast and low stretch of land like fingers deep in a glove. Water defines life here. Most of the rivers spill into a network of estuaries, which are bodies of mixed water, the fresh water from the rivers rushing along the surface while the salt water from the sea scrapes the bottom, density working as the dividing line. The estuaries breed the most diverse marsh classroom: egrets and heron, shrimp and oysters, striped bass and red snapper, sea turtles and snakes, dragonflies and fire ants, red wolves and black bears. The eastern North Carolina watershed reminds us of the order of a world without politics. But it can also be an exact reminder of the order of politics. A predator in one situation can, in another, become prey. We love this place. Nick grew up about 30 minutes from Bladen in Hope Mills, a town in the Sandhills known mostly as a bedroom community for Fort Bragg, the largest military installation in the country. Nick's father was a Special Forces soldier, a Green Beret who was killed in 2005 by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan. Nick was just a teenager when 3 men in Class A uniforms came to his home to deliver the news. He spent the next several years of his life trying to understand the why and how. He's devoted his career as a television reporter to trying to make things right. The thrust of his job at North Carolina's oldest television station, WBTV, is to investigate corruption and fraud. That's how Nick found himself back in Bladen County in December 2018, knocking on doors about the election fraud scandal there. His connections gave him access to some of the main players. In this book, you'll hear stories from McCrae Dowless, who hasn't done interviews with anyone else. Stories that started flowing only after Nick told him he grew up not far from here. Michael, meanwhile, spent 4 years working at the Fayetteville Observer during the heart of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. He was, as it happens, a reporter at the paper when Nick's father died. Michael's covered eastern North Carolina extensively since then, from stories about wildlife to long-form pieces about the rural healthcare crisis. Michael's father was a charter fisherman and crabber, and the way of life in eastern North Carolina reminds him of where he grew up. Over the course of our work in Bladen County, we found ourselves reporting not just as observers, but also sometimes as participants. For those reasons, you'll see that from time to time we become characters in this book. Nick, mostly. In some of the strangest moments, Nick would receive a press release or call saying McCrae Dowless was being charged with a crime. Nick would call McCrae's number and find out the cops hadn't shown up yet. McCrae didn't even know they were coming. In some ways, those encounters were metaphors for the overall story of Bladen County, a place that's often a little bit behind. Because if Bladen County's the mother county, it is more of a guiding light than an annoying flicker. We shouldn't dismiss the election fraud that happened here as an outlier, but recognize it as an early-stage disease. And given that the person at the center of that disease, a low-budget operative named McCrae Dowless, has worked for both political parties in his career, we shouldn't treat it as a Democrat disease or a Republican disease. It's an American disease, and Bladen County is an indicator. Bladen gave birth to the state's most prominent black family, the Spauldings, who went on to start Black Wall Street in Durham. And from that family came one of the most important black politicians of all time, George Henry White. Born in a rickety house in a swamp along the Bladen-Columbus County line, White served in Congress from 1897 to 1901. He was the last black congressman before Jim Crow laws truly took effect, and the last black congressman in the United States for a generation, and the last black congressman in North Carolina for 90 years. In this book, we'll draw clear connections between White's years in Congress and the 2018 election. The 1898 campaign that drove him from office and the campaign of 2018 are merely distant cousins, separated by only 2 generations and 120 years of racism in rural politics. Like most of the country's issues with race, this story is one of fits and starts, progress and retaliation. So we split the book into 3 parts. The first builds towards the 2018 election through the main characters on the Republican side, particularly McCrae Dowless and Mark Harris, and shows how they became the defendants in the case of democracy versus Bladen County. This part explains how the election was part of a white backlash to the election of a black sheriff 8 years earlier. Events in Bladen County today have clear predecessors. Part 2 tells the story of race in eastern North Carolina through its defining black characters. George Henry White, for sure, but also an aging schoolteacher named Delilah Blanks, civil rights attorney Irving Joyner, and other modern civil rights activists who, in the late 1990s, built the black political powerhouse that resulted in the white backlash of the 2010s. One thing that's consistent throughout time is that the poorest and most vulnerable people come out worse off. Those in power in eastern North Carolina in George Henry White's day and those in power today were experts at sorting people into groups and making it impossible for a poor white man to see himself standing alongside a poor black man, even if that relationship would be mutually beneficial. What was true then remains true today. A few figures from each race emerge with the fortune and power, while their neighbors suffer. And Part 3 brings the stories together in the winter of 2018, when all of Bladen County, black and white, rich and poor, became lumped together as one, under searing and unforgiving national attention that simply made them out to be the jokes of the backwoods. What those stories all missed, of course, is what happened in Bladen County could happen in any community where desperation rules. In any place where white people confuse race with power, and where black people want power for their race. In any place where the rivers are rising higher and higher each fall with every named storm. Where entire neighborhoods sit empty and rotting. Where the small family farmers sold out to the middleman farmers who sold out to the industrial farmers who sold out to foreign investors. Most of the men in the church reception hall worked the tobacco fields every summer as a kid, and spent the money they made on new coveralls to wear to school each fall. When consumers finally came to believe warnings about the links between tobacco and cancer in the 1980s and 1990s, Bladen County's cash crop became worthless. The people here had to come up with another way to make a living. They turned to pork. Today, there are about 29 hogs for every person in Bladen County. Agriculture has always been the way to survive here. During the American Revolution, the Patriots used chicken eggs to defeat the Tories in Elizabethtown. For several weeks, a woman named Sally Salter took the eggs to the Loyalist camp and reported back to the Patriots to tell them what she'd seen. Eventually, a young rebel colonel named Thomas Robinson used the information to surprise the Tory camp, forcing them down a hill and into a ravine. The Tories retreated. Robinson got a county named after him next door. The British abandoned Wilmington. The ravine became known as Tory Hole Park, and Bladen County went on farming food for the rest of the country. This nation's forgotten where their food comes from, Colin Roberts, a farmer at the prayer breakfast, tells Michael. Roberts raises chickens and cows. His parents grow peanuts and cotton and corn. They're in their 70s, and they've lost all of their savings in the past 3 years, thanks to crop losses from floods related to Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. These people who believe they have little to no say in Washington politics instead spend all of their energy on local political races: sheriff, county commission, even the Soil and Water Conservation Board. Meanwhile, congressional candidates keep doing whatever it is congressional candidates do. They've bickered in their quest to top their neighbors in local politics, sure, but they never thought it was more than punching a hole in the wall of their own house. Yes, they knew that after the church breakfasts break up, the black men in the room would rally around black candidates, and the white men in the room would rally around white candidates. That's how it is. Yes, they knew that the sheriff's office wielded more power than any sheriff should. Yes, they knew McCrae Dowless was crooked long before he was on the front page of every major newspaper. But they don't believe those things define them. At the end of the breakfast, the men at the Tar Heel Baptist Church pass around an offering plate. They collect $158, mostly in singles, fives, and change. They plan to donate all of it to a local drug abuse and rehabilitation center. One bad man don't make a county, Roberts, the chicken and beef farmer, tells Michael. It's all the good people. You saw what these men did this morning. They took money out of their own pockets and gave it to people hooked on drugs. The visiting pastor gives a 15-minute sermon at the meeting, a message of positivity and hard work and resilience. He tells the men that their mission for the month is to go throughout Bladen County and tell people that God loves them. Much of the coverage of the scandal turned Bladen County into the land of hicks and hillbillies, druggies and dolts. Attention spans being short, national audiences distilled the ordeal into good guys and bad guys, with no villain more evil than McCrae Dowless. His portrait became the face of election tampering. Democrats especially turned him into a meme of rural life, a skinny and conniving white, rural Republican in the Trump era. In this book, we'll show that McCrae Dowless couldn't care less about Donald Trump. We'll show that he's merely the only one prosecuted in a much larger system of corruption, a fall guy for a country that struggled to acknowledge its racist past and the role of big money politics in exacerbating inequities. He's not innocent. He's also not guilty. He was mostly the next man up in a system that rewards people for hauling votes at whatever cost for the people who hold the cash. Part 1. Thank God for Bladen. Chapter 1. The Missing Piece, April 6, 2017. Can you think of a more comfortable place to have a meeting? Ray Britt. The preacher swung open the door to raise furniture liquidators. A gas range and leather recliner, marked down to sell, lined the sidewalk. A few buildings away on the main street, the early lunch crowd, all suspenders and jeans and sun-worn farm faces, lined up for the famous $2.25 flat-top hamburgers wrapped in paper at Melvin's, established 1938. Most folks in Elizabethtown, Bladen County's biggest city, population 3,469, had spent the previous night watching the weather forecasters break into regularly scheduled programs with tornado watches. A few inches of rain fell, and the wind roared like hell, but there were no funnel clouds. This time, at least. In this little eastern North Carolina city, where there's not much to do but worry about the weather and everybody else's business, that's a blessing. The preacher had come a long way for the meeting. he'd driven 3 hours from his home in the sparkling city of Charlotte. He looked a little out of place, his head of silver hair parted too neatly, his nose too straight, and his smile too warm. He looked like someone who'd come to tell you what you want to hear, with the unspoken expectation that you'll return the favor. The furniture store's faded brown shingles hung low like a brow over the storefront windows. A square sign, red and yellow, read, "Ray's Inc." The store's owner, a fellow by the name of Ray, walked from behind the counter to greet his guest. The preacher introduced himself as Mark Harris. He's a family man, a husband, and a father. A solid-as-stone conservative. A Baptist minister. In this part of the Bible Belt, God's still a pretty good sales pitch. The showroom furniture was arranged in neat rows across the floor. Sofas, love seats, and chairs of every color imaginable basked in fluorescent yellow lighting. Ray Britt wore his hair combed back, too, but his was a little slicker than Harris's. Ray is a county commissioner, and he was honored to host some of the most important Republicans in Bladen County to meet with Harris here. On their way were bona fide local celebrities like Pat Melvin, maybe the richest person in the county, the man whose family name is on the hamburger joint, and Walter McDuffie, the county's Republican Party chairman. The sheriff was supposed to come too, but had to swing by a funeral first. The final and most important guest was a 61-year-old man with a sandy beard and wrinkles on the sides of his eyes. His name was McCrae Dowless. A former felon with a steady smoking problem, McCrae is an unassuming character whose mind stays on politics and numbers. On a drive through his county, McCrae can point to each home and tell you the owner's political parties and whether they voted in the most recent election. He had a knack for winning elections that would soon elevate him from unknown, slump-shouldered, short-sleeved local boy to a man known around the world as the political operative, at the center of the biggest election fraud scandal in the country's history. Not that he thinks he deserves the attention. They settled into the living room furniture on the right-hand side of the store. "Can you think of a more comfortable place to have a meeting in Bladen County?" Ray Britt asked. Harris, the preacher, opened the session. He was a little nervous. "I came down here because, I'm considering running for the 9th District, and I would like for you all to sort of explain to me what the landscape of politics in Bladen County looks like." Harris finished within a whisker of the Republican nomination in 2016, losing by only 144 votes out of about 26,000 cast. So on this April 2017 morning, he'd backed out of the long concrete driveway of his 3,500-square-foot brick home in Charlotte's wealthy apron and pointed east towards Bladen County because he believed that the people in this room, these cursing and smoking and yes-sir-saying country boys, had the power to deliver him to Washington. The two corners of the 9th District couldn't be more different. Charlotte is the fastest-growing city in the Southeast, the second biggest bank center outside of New York, the city that gave birth to Bank of America. Bladen County, some 150 miles east of the skyscrapers and tower cranes, had lost 4% of its population in the past decade. Many of those who remain spend their days plowing fields or working on the line at the world's largest hog slaughtering operation. Harris found a receptive audience in Bladen County that day. The Republicans in the showroom were shopping for a new political partner. They'd grown sick of the one they had in office, Robert Pittenger. The second-term congressman and real estate investor was far richer than even Harris, with a mansion along the 7th Fairway at Quail Hollow Country Club in Charlotte's haughtiest neighborhood. Pittenger won the office in 2014 by just 5 percentage points over his opponent in the general election, the narrowest victory by a Republican in the district since 1986. To the Pat Melvins and McCrae Dowlesses of Bladen County, Pittenger was just another representation of Washington. A distant man who didn't visit enough. All around eastern North Carolina, rural hospitals were closing. Opioids were slicing families apart. Hurricanes seemed to pour harder every year. And the only thing people of all politics and races could agree on is that crooks in Washington don't give a damn about them. Harris seemed to care. From his haircut, to his jawline, to his family portrait, he looked like the ideal politician, almost a Southern Baptist version of Mitt Romney. He was from a rural area in North Carolina himself, he told them, grew up idolizing Billy Graham. He'd been the president of the State Baptist Convention, and his audience in the discount love seats liked that. They knew and he knew that the majority of the votes in the 9th District were in Charlotte and the counties closest to it. But still, he was here, talking to them, way out in Bladen County, and that mattered to them. Harris was here because he believed they could be the difference. He believed they could turn his close loss in 2016 into a victory in 2018. He believed he needed to connect in places his neighbors in Charlotte can't find on a map. He believed he needed to connect with people like those in Ray's furniture store, one of them more than the others. It's a short drive from one America to another. Let's ride for a minute with Mark Harris across the 9th Congressional District that morning. First, you slip out of his neighborhood, surrounded by 2- and 3-story brick homes, through rows of mature trees and luxury SUVs. Then, you turn left onto the busier street called Providence and pass a Shell gas station. Of all the Shell gas stations in the world, this is the one where white supremacist Dylan Roof stopped and used a debit card to buy snacks in June 2015, the morning after he killed 9 black people at a Bible study at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. From that gas station, you merge onto Charlotte's Beltway, a 60-mile loop named Interstate 485. A few miles later, you might spot one of those cell phone towers with the fake greenery on top, as if it's fooling anyone. Then comes the exit for Highway 74, the east-west transportation lifeline of the region. Nicknamed Andrew Jackson Highway, US 74 is a 4-lane divided strip of asphalt that runs across the 9th District like a belt. At first, it's a maddening stop-and-go stretch through suburban Union County, before opening up just east of Marshville, the birthplace of country music legend Randy Travis. Then you head through the service stations and fast food stops in Anson County, past farms and a peach ice cream shop. Then you'll struggle to keep your eyes open as the road cuts through the miles and miles of pines. There's Richmond and Scotland counties, which have the fiercest high school football rivalry in the state, but not much else these days. A few miles off the highway, the old Rockingham Speedway, the Rock, sits empty, a concrete tomb to a time when NASCAR was the state's most important sport. Beyond that, you may be jarred awake by a sign that says the highway is now nicknamed the American Indian Highway. It's a striking shift considering that everywhere else the same road is named for the president responsible for Indian removal. But these sorts of contradictions abound as you enter Robeson County, home of the Lumbee Indian tribe. As you pass through Lumberton, you might consider that just 6 months before Harris's trip, Hurricane Matthew dumped so much rain here that the river lapped against the overpasses you're crossing. Life has sharper edges in this wing of the state. Flooded-out strips of public housing rot in plain sight. A penitentiary with barbed wire pops up on your left. The red clay of the Piedmont gives way to the sandy soil of the coastal plain, and floodline marks can still be seen high on the longleaf and cypress trees. Basketball legend Michael Jordan's father, James Jordan, was murdered in this spot in 1994 after he pulled over to take a nap in his Lexus. Lumberton's claim to fame, other than being home to the largest Native American tribe east of the Mississippi, is that it gave birth to a Black Panther named Afeni Shakur Davis, who gave birth to a hip-hop icon named Tupac Shakur. Otherwise, it makes its way into the news most often for violence. If it's not Jordan's killing, it's the time a few rebels took the small-town newspaper hostage in 1988, pointing their guns at the heads of sports writers and copy chiefs because the men wanted to bring attention to the corruption in the area. As it happens, they were absolutely right about the corruption. In the years since, as funnel clouds and hurricanes came and went, leaving countless families staring at rubble that was once a home, politicians, both local and statewide, withheld disaster money again and again. This hard, compromised land is where the white preacher with the good hair needed to win enough votes to flip the next election. Curve down the long cloverleaf exit ramp in Lumberton. From here, you'll pass a mashup of abandoned old hotels, industrial buildings, and aging strip malls. Just when it feels like the end of the earth, you know you have a half hour left to Elizabethtown. Not far beyond the Bladen County line, you'll notice the smell. Pigs outnumber people here. The Smithfield Foods hog processing plant stretches for nearly a mile along the highway. The hard, physical labor of turning pigs into food provides a livelihood for thousands in the area who, otherwise, wouldn't have anywhere to work. Not far from there, 4 lanes drop to 2 as you enter Elizabethtown. Just inside the town limits, you'll pass a Mexican restaurant in an old, faded yellow barn. Across the street is the Tractor Supply store and a Walmart. Then a string of churches, Elizabethtown Town Hall, and a few lawyers' offices. until you hit the main drag and see the building with the faded brown shingles. Now you're in front of Ray's Inc., in the seat of the mother county, the humble set.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?